what the last year, and if you could say COVID has done, is it actually brought into sharp and immediate focus what I think was inevitable anyway. Just the changes in the way that the world lives and works together, demographic changes, things like climate change, all of these issues were over the next 5 to 10 years going to force us as a sector and as an organisation to look at how we do development and actually force people to think about what is a good outcome for development. COVID simply came along, introduced something that was really quite dramatic and has really forced us to confront most of those issues in one hit very, very quickly.
And that whole transformation program has looked at basically the way that we look to develop scenarios around these sorts of things, how we mitigate around risks and those sorts of things, and then also the modalities that we can use around volunteering, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important too that we don't accept or think that once we get through this we will go back to where we were, and for the reasons I just sort of outlined, and that is we won't. So I think the things around modalities and how we assess and manage risk and the scenarios that we develop have to reflect the fact that even post-COVID we're going to be operating in a different world, and we need to make that mind shift, and the outcomes that our partners and countries are looking for are going to change. Even just something as simple as the reliance on online connectivity over the last 12 months is actually changing how they engage with the world. We need to be part of that and be able to capitalise on the skills, the capabilities, and the advancements they've made in the last 12 months.
And there's, we were talking about it through the conversations with our partners, with our volunteers, with our key stakeholders. There's no silver bullet around it, but we have this mosaic of you looking at modalities, right?
Yeah.
And e-volunteering is one, but not the only one, is it?
No. In fact, I think all of these modalities, e-volunteering is a very good one to think about. It's extremely useful. It has a place in the future, but it also has its limitations.
Yeah.
And I think, as you just said, it's not a silver bullet. I think probably there was a tendency earlier on to think that maybe it would be a good alternative way. It is, but to a degree only. And so, it'll have a place going forward, but it will be e-volunteering in conjunction with something else.
And then I guess when we look at if there's an interim arrangement and then the future operating, things like how do we get some more in-country support around maybe using resources that we can tap into.
Yeah.
Localization, I guess, is one aspect of that.
Yeah, localization is the big shift, and I mean it's a sector or global wide shift, and I think it's a maturing of the development world as people are now understanding that enduring capacity building and enduring change has to have an increasingly a more increasing local content in it. And the capabilities and the skills of the communities in which we work in the organisation, that's growing as well. So we need to actually embrace that more in how we do it. So that's what localisation is. It's about actually using community strengths and resource to actually have a bigger part in the change that they're trying to do.
And then when we think of our relationships with our key stakeholders like Foreign Affairs and Trade in New Zealand, we're looking at our strategic alignment with some of their bigger strategies from a national way, as well as the way that they, I guess, work with us strategically and less transactionally to support some of those things, right?
Yeah, and I think an important thing in that is and this is timely for New Zealand to actually, and for as part of our broader aid program, is to stand back and to say, well, actually, what does volunteering for development do and where does it fit? We know it does. And anecdotally and historically, we can show all sorts of evidence to say that it does. But now is the time to actually try and articulate that in a very clear way. Volunteers working in this way or these ways in partner countries contribute to aid program outcomes in this way. And I think we need to take the opportunity to really define what that is. Often in the past, the way we've operated, and it's been very effective, is that in response to an assignment or a need, we would go out and find the talent to meet that need. That will have its place. I mean, that's still fundamentally the way we work. But what we're doing now is focusing more on actually building a pool of talent that we can then, when a need is starting to be detected or evolving, we can very quickly sort of say, right, we can match that need with some of the people or some of the talent that we have in this pool, and therefore, A, respond to it quicker, but B, actually probably shape the task a little bit clearer by matching supply and demand together, as opposed to sort of going through the process of getting to this is what's required and then trying to find someone that fits.
And that's even outside of a COVID-19 environment.
Yeah.
This co-development approach that we've got and we're cementing into the way that we operate is really powerful.
Yeah.
I even reflect on, when we think around Te Tiriti and its role with VSA and some of the, I guess, the innovations that you started to look at in terms of engagement with Tangata Phenoi.
Yeah. I mean, this is key. I think if you go back and look at VSA, it has been a historical reflection. The organisation's reflected the values of New Zealand, and that's been its real strength. Well, New Zealand is evolving, and the bicultural aspect of who we are, the tangata whenua is stronger. A New Zealander is now different, and so what we need to make sure that as an organisation, how we operate, how our volunteers are selected, are supported and seen, reflects actually what New Zealand is today.
Yeah.
And that is why it's so important that we engage like that. It's also so very important too that we actually get those connections with the local Pacifica community, because at the end of the day, we are a Pacific nation. The Pacifica community is an increasingly large part of our population, and we work in the Pacific. To be quite frank, it is one of the challenges going on forward. How do we make the work of VSA and working here something that a wider representation of New Zealanders wants to be part of?
Yeah.
Or more importantly, sees it as relevant.
They trust us.
Correct.
And we can get more robust outcomes from having this diversity and different ways of thinking, experience, knowledge.
A healthy organisation is not just something that appears in management books. I mean, I've experienced it myself. The healthiest organisation actually has a high degree of diversity.
Yep. And the reason I'm here today basically is that we're ready to submit, to a key stakeholder for us, MFAT, our new strategic design document. And that brings it all together.
That brings it all together, and in its early days, there's obviously a lot of work to go through with that. But essentially, the focus of the next 2 years, and we're going to still have continuing uncertainty around borders and things like that.
Absolutely.
But the focus of the next 2 years is to deal with that and to obviously recover our programs and to start getting them back operating and using the new modalities that we've come up with. But importantly, the focus of that 2 years is for us to really shift the dial of VSA and the sector and how we operate with partners. So what do I like to see, or what do I hope to see at the end of 2 years? I want to see an organised, apart from the fact that we've resumed our programs and so forth, but I want to see a VSA that is thinking and operating more representatively of New Zealand and who we are. Is operating in a more agile way. It will be smaller than it possibly has been. Is actually stronger connected to Māori and Pacifica.
Absolutely.
Is more strongly connected, or I shouldn't say more strongly, but is possibly differently connected to our Pacific partners. To reflect where they are.
And this whole maturation that's happening around self-determination, around the Pacific, and having their voices really at the front in terms of that, right? Yeah.
I think there's a real risk here. I think there is a real risk for a lot of countries to go back into these communities in a rush, and to try and step back to where things left off before COVID came along.
Yeah.
I think that would be a failure if that happens. I think we need to be going back into those partner communities where we worked and saying, where are you at now and how do we continue to work together? And it will be different.
And it'll be different, and we'll be able to, the new mosaic around the different modalities and stuff, including localization, including e-volunteering, including graduated,
Yeah.
what do we call the graduated program?
Graduate assignments.
Assignments, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That'll all really support that.